here. What did we learn yesterday? Learned a little bit about, excuse me, a little bit about CSS3 animations. We learned how to do our keyframes. We learned a little bit about forms and how to use our input tags to get our fields to show up. And we learned about cards and Bootstrap components and how we can use something that's pre-built into Bootstrap so that we don't have to create those components from scratch. We revisited the shortcut to add in not just a row, but any div with that period in the name of the class that we want to add in, and hitting enter and having that autocomplete in Emmet work in our favor. We learned not only about footer, but also the semantic HTML elements, right? So we used section for the first time. We used footer. Tonight, we're going to get into the nav bar that is in Bootstrap. We learned not only about card, but all the classes, all the subclasses that come with card, like card body and card title and all of that. We played around a little bit with kind of material design with our box shadows and added that to our sections to kind of make the differentiation between all of our sections pop out. I ranted about WordPress because if you haven't learned yet, you will learn very soon that you can get me going on a rant about just about anything. And rants are not always negative or a bad thing. I looked up the statistic. I think it's 46% of all sites on the internet use WordPress under the hood. So that is certainly a good skill to learn after this boot camp for sure. We reviewed container versus container fluid, right? Netflix, we did a container fluid because we wanted it to go to the full width of the screen. In other words, if we poured a container liquid out on the page, we want it to be fluid and go all the way to the edges, compared to a regular container, which is going to be fixed width, right? It's not going to get bigger than a certain spot, especially if you're on a very large monitor. Yes, we can go over keyframes again. It's not necessarily that we're targeting the keyframes, it's that @ which is a special symbol. So let me pull up my code from yesterday and I'll be able to explain that a little bit better. So we are on the keyframes. We aren't really targeting the any particular element here. It's like we're kind of building the animation from scratch. We're trying to tell the computer how we would do this animation. And so the @keyframes is kind of setting us up. So we name this animation called fade in. And we tell it where it's starting from with an opacity of 0 and where the animation is headed to. So we say, all right, we're going to start with 0. And what are we animating it up to? Up all the way up to 1 or 100%. We call that animation fade in. We could call that whatever we wanted, but then we call that animation down here. So we kind of get the selector, then we tell the selector to animate, and what animation should it use? The fade in. How does it fade in? Well, it starts from an opacity of 0 and makes its way to an opacity of 1. If it's quicker to unmute, Jen, you are welcome to do that as well.
So you're pretty much, when you do, I couldn't figure out like why you actually use the @keyframes is like keyframes. Is it the name of something that you're using, or like I get why you did fade in because you're pretty much just giving it an ID without the ID tag?
So the keyframes is basically defining what we want our animation to be. So if we call this like fade, if we call this like show up from nothing, we could do that and just call it down here as the same thing.
Okay. But keyframes is always what you're trying to put to identify an animation.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out.
I believe there are other ways of building an animation that wouldn't use at keyframes, but they would use another at something.
Okay.
And then you could build it from there.
Okay.
But yeah, this is kind of this is telling the CSS what to do for the animation. And then once we name that animation with the at keyframes, we're able to call that in the animation property. Asma, the opacity is between 0 and 1. So 0 is obviously 0%, 1 is 100%. And then if you wanted it to fade in, but only get to like half percentage of opacity or 50%, you could do 0.5 here, and that would be the equivalent of 50%. So yes, we are using decimals. It's just a matter of converting the decimal to a percentage. The same goes for like the RGBA. 0 is 0%, 1 is 100%, and then if you did like 0.75, it would be 75%. Were there any other questions from yesterday that I can go over for you guys?
Max, could you just explain the difference again between a section and a div?
Yeah, so there is no real difference to the computer. The computer is going to treat a section just like it's going to treat a div. The reason why we do it as a section is because a screen reader can't tell the difference between divs apart, right? So if we have someone who is visually impaired and is going on our website, the screen reader is just going to start at the top and it's just going to start reading everything out. And if it's a div, it's going to ignore the div and say, hey, this is just for some layout. I'm just going to keep reading everything. But if the screen reader hits a section tag instead of a div tag, it's going to read that aloud to the end user. And it's going to say, the website has a new section starting here, and it has this content inside of it. So instead of just being a generic kind of readout, it's more semantic about describing the content that's going in it, which is why it's called a semantic tag. So we not only use that for our section, we also use that down for our footer, right? So we put our footer in there. If we just put that in a div, it would just read it aloud. But instead, the screen reader is going to hit that footer tag and say, the footer of the site contains copyright 2023 ZaneTech LLC. So it just is describing the content that's inside that HTML element instead of just a generic div, which the screen reader doesn't really know what kind of content is associated with it.
Thank you. That was a good explanation.
And there are some increasing legal concerns around website design and development, especially with accessibility. Caitlin, who was in last night as our TA, is working at SU, and that's a primary concern. Every time they design a website, they want to make sure that it is accessible as possible. So unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time to dive into accessibility and all the right standards around that. But if you are either working for a larger company or you are doing HTML designs from scratch, accessibility is a whole can of worms you can open and get into and become an expert in. Things around like, hey, I can't use this color text on this color background because there's not enough contrast between it. Or, hey, all of my image tags should really have alt tags in them describing what that image is for. It goes into, hey, my website needs to be able to blow up text so that someone who may be visually impaired can easily see that text. And if things start hiding when I start blowing up text to a certain point, that's another concern. All different kinds of things around accessibility that are certainly important. We just unfortunately don't have the time to do a deep dive of them in class.
Right. I just want to add, it's a huge SEO thing too. So if you want people to see your site, it has to be accessible or it won't, Google won't rank it.
Absolutely. SEO, just in case we haven't touched on that term yet, is search engine optimization. And it is basically, no offense, because I think hacking is important, but it's hacking the search engine to prioritize your website, right? So it is exactly what the term says: search engine, Google, Bing, any of the big ones. It is optimizing your website so that the crawlers at Google or any of the search engines can go through your site and easily extract out the content to optimize your search results higher up. And so SEO is an art form all on its own, and it is a constantly evolving art form because the formulas that Google and all the other search engines use are constantly evolving as well. And so SEO is something that you can definitely make a full-time job out of. And people will go through pre-made websites and optimize them to be more search engine friendly. That's less of a concern when we're doing our own HTML and CSS from scratch. But as you work on bigger websites that may be using something like WordPress, or dynamically generating content or having a database behind them, that's when SEO starts to become more important. Especially if you're a local business and you do a search for, I don't know, oh, I want to get a roof put on my house. Well, there are 15 different roofing companies in Syracuse, and a smaller one may not have as many reviews, but if they hire someone to do their search engine optimization, they could come up higher than a lot of the other bigger companies in the area. So something to think about. Any other questions? I am going to say 15 minutes at the end of class tonight to make sure we've got some time to go through terms and update our list, just to make sure that anything for flashcards or stuff like that, we've got to go to document source for that. All right. So no real surprises here as to where we are headed. We are going to do two things. We're going to start with mobile responsiveness, which is saying, how can we make it so that when we have our form that's showing up on the right side, when we hit a small enough screen size, how can we make that form just wrap underneath? The same goes for our portfolio. We kind of have all three of these stacked up, but when I hit a small enough screen size, you can see it all resizes to fit that content in. So that's going to be the first 20-ish minutes of class. And once we get that done, we are going to dive into our first externally linked page. So we're going to learn about the Bootstrap navbar up here. We're going to learn how to link to an external page. We're going to build this out using our grid system. And then we are not only going to call this project complete, but we're going to call all of our HTML and CSS module complete. That may be good news for some of you who are sick of div soup and would like to stop eating div soup. JavaScript is coming up next. However, we've got 2 more weeks before we do a deep dive into JavaScript. Starting next week, we're going to do an intro to computer science. So I'm aggregating a bunch of different resources here. CS50 is a course that is offered by Harvard, I believe Harvard. That is kind of world renowned for computer science. I am also integrating in some content from AP computer science. I think they renamed that course, but the NSF, the National Science Foundation, developed that curriculum. So we're going to be integrating that in. And then we're going to be integrating a decade of me writing code and knowing what's important and what concepts we need to learn before we dive into JavaScript. So that is coming up next week. The following week, you actually have a week off from me. You don't need to hear my voice. Nathan Evans is going to come in, who is a DevOps engineer at a company called Datadog. So not next week, but the following week. And he's going to teach you how to use GitHub and then use GitHub pages to deploy your first website. So you're going to be using this portfolio code again. You're going to get your site out on the internet. You're going to learn about DNS, or the domain name system, and how you can buy a domain. We'll have money on your stipend cards for that. A domain costs like $14-ish a year, depending on what domain name extension you're getting. It is not a requirement to get a domain name, but it is recommended that everyone get a domain name as close to your name as possible or your company name, because it's important to have a web presence, right? It's kind of hard to say, hey, hire me as a website developer if you don't have your own website. So that will be coming up in 2 weeks. And then when you come back, we're going to be diving into JavaScript projects and getting our hands dirty. Goggin, what's up?
So once we upload the code to the domain name, like, you know, the site is running, we
Yep.
can switch that to a different portfolio, right?
Absolutely.
So can I use like the whatever I use for, like, you know, for my computer name? I use like codeonly.com kind of thing, so I don't use my name.
If the domain name is available, you can use whatever
Okay.
domain name you would like.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. And Nathan's going to take you through the process of buying that domain on, I believe, Google Domains, and take you through all of those steps.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to dive right on in. I am headed to my desktop, into my code, into my week 4. I'm going to right click on my day 3 portfolio and duplicate that sucker. I'm going to rename that to day 4 portfolio. Take that, drag it right into my VS Code to get it open. I am going to hit go live. And that's going to bring up our site where we left it off. I will also start a live share with you guys. And that is now in the chat. And I will also make sure that this is running. So you can pop open my browser if you would like to. And I will give everyone a minute to join in. I'm going to pop open my index and my style.css. And I'm going to throw my style.css down on the bottom half. No, bad. Down on the bottom half. And we're going to start with our contact form being mobile responsive. All right, so to dive on in here, I'm actually going to head over to the Bootstrap documentation. And the reason why I pull this documentation up is it's really, really important that you guys get practice reading technical documentation. It's so important, in fact, that there is an entire full-time role called a technical writer. And their full-time job is to just write documentation so other developers know how to use their developers' code. And so we've actually had some graduates come out of this program who say, you know what, I get all of this. I don't want to be the one writing the code, though. I want to be the one reading the code and explaining to other developers how to use that code. And that is what a technical writer is. But even if you decide not to go into technical writing, it's still important to be able to read documentation so that you can apply it on your own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open the documentation here. I'm going to scroll down to layout, and I'm going to pop open the grid. And this, hopefully, is something that we're already kind of familiar with, right? We've got our row, and we've got 3 columns. And how does that actually manifest? How does that look? It looks like up here. Okay. Well, none of that is new. But what is new is this: our grid supports 6 responsive breakpoints. That's kind of interesting. Let's scroll down and read a little bit more about that. So what they're saying is the number of columns, no matter what screen size we're at, is always going to be 12. But if we would like to target different screen sizes, we are able to use these 6 different screens. So in other words, if our screen is bigger than 576 pixels, but less than 768 pixels, that is going to be our small screen size, right? That continues on. If our screen size is between 768 and 992, Bootstrap is going to consider that a medium or MD size screen. Well, so far in our columns, we've only said col 6. We haven't specified a breakpoint size. What we are able to do on this is actually add in some additional information. We can say on a small size screen, we would like this column to take up 12 spaces. In other words, take up all 12 columns available to us in our grid system. But on a medium size screen and up, it should only take up 6. I'm also going to use that same breakdown down here. I'm going to say, hey, on a small size screen or below, it should be a 12. But on a medium size screen or larger, it should only take up 6 columns. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to take a look. Everything looks the way it did before, but now when I drag this over and hit that small screen size, look at where my contact form is. It's underneath it. Okay, well, why is it doing that? Because on a medium-sized screen, if we take a look, it is still 6 across, and this one is still 6 across. We can visually see that based off of how much space it's taking up. But when we bring this over, all of a sudden, the text goes to 12 across. If we hover over that, we can see, hey, that's taking up all the space. And if we come down here, we can see that is also taking up a 12. Let's practice that concept also down here. We've got our portfolio section, and I'm actually going to break this up into 3 different areas. I'm going to say, hey, on a medium-sized screen, it should be a 4. On a small-sized screen, it should be a 6. And on an extra small screen, it should be a 12. I'm going to save that. I'm going to copy that div, and I'm going to paste it in here and in here. So now I expand out, and I've got my 4, 4, and 4, 3 across, and I start shrinking down a little bit, and I hit a little bit more my small size screen, which is going to put a 6, and another 6. And if I shrink it down even further, I'm going to get my columns taking up all 12 available spaces. This is a concept that's like so simple that it can be hard to grasp. So make sure you understand how we're targeting this. The order of these classes does matter. You do want to start with smallest and work your way up. But what we're basically doing here is we're assigning different column sizes based off of the size of the screen. And the way Bootstrap does this under the hood is all media queries. But because this is predefined for us, that is taking care of all of the media queries, so we don't have to write them ourselves. So I'm just going to scroll up, make sure there's nothing else on my site that I need to make responsive. A good tool that you can use is if you go into the inspect tool, you can click on this little icon, the second icon in, and that's going to give you a drop down up here of all these different devices, popular devices that are out on the market. So it is good if you know your customer is using a certain kind of device, or if you know that your site is commonly going to be used on mobile or on a tablet, to come in here and play around with that and say, okay, the iPad Air is a very popular device. So if I'm looking at this, this is what my site is going to look like if I load it on an iPad. And I think that that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. I can also click this little icon up here at the top, and that's going to rotate the device. So if I load this page in landscape on my iPad and scroll down, this is what it's going to look like on there. So I'm pretty happy with that. I can play around with a couple other devices. I can check what it will look like on an iPhone. And maybe I would want to go through in here and tweak it so there's a little bit of padding or margin between them. But I think for now, I'm pretty happy with this. I can click on this little icon in the bottom left, and that will bring me out of mobile device testing mode. Kenny, when you say your contact cards are small, you mean even smaller than mine?
Yeah, I don't know. It just looks really tiny. I did everything right, but I don't know why it's kind of messed up things. Okay, I
Share the
should
screen, let's take a look. Yeah.
I'm gonna share the first one so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, can you see it?
Oh, yeah, that's not good.
Okay.
Okay, so let's take a look at your HTML.
Okay, I'll share the other screen then. Okay, can you see it?
Yes. Okay, so we've got a div inside of a div, and that's what we don't want. So what we did in my code was replace this col4 with this div that, with this div that is having all three classes in it. So this col4 we essentially replaced with this div down in here.
Okay.
Let me take this one out. And I think we actually ended up with an extra closing div on each one of these that we don't want. Take that one out and save. Prettier is back to normal. Take a look in the browser. Did that fix it?
Sounds good. Yep.
Cool.
Thanks.
No problem. Anyone? Plush, what's up?
What happens when we don't specify a breaking point, like MD, Excel?
It defaults to that on all screen sizes. So we didn't have the breakpoints in before. We just said col6. That will apply a col6 on extra small all the way up to extra large. Which, if you don't want that responsiveness, that's a totally fine thing to do. Sometimes you may decide like, hey, I don't really want these wrapping. I want them to be all fitting across on the screen. That's fine, right? And this is just a matter of saying, all right, when screen size gets tight, how can I make this feel a little bit better? And normally the answer for that is to push all the content down. Instead of going across, go down. That solves a lot of problems.
Right. But for example, like in the contact text, like we mentioned small, we mentioned medium, but not extra small or extra large.
It will default to whatever the last one is.
Okay.
So MD and above will all get a 4.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And that's why the order does matter, because if you did, actually, I don't know what would happen, but you are supposed to start with the smallest and work your way over. And if we left this out, what it would do is it would keep it as a 12 until it got up to the medium, and then medium and above, it would make it a 4. So you don't have to hit every breakpoint, but it's just a matter of playing with it and seeing the impact that it has on your site. Okay, we are going to dive into our next section, which is when I click on this Make It Rain button, it just takes me to the top of the page. That's no fun. What I want it to do is make it so when I click on this button, it takes me over to this page. So to make that happen, I'm going to make a new file and I'm going to call this weather.
Share your screen.
Thank you. I am going to head to VS Code and delete what I was doing before I was stupidly not sharing my screen. I'm going to hit the plus icon and type in on the file. Don't get the folder. You want a new file. And we're going to call that weather.html. I'm going to hit enter on that, and that's going to make me a new blank file. I'm going to use my exclamation point enter to dump in most of the stuff that I need here. And I'm going to say, all right, going to get ahead of the game here. I'm going to call my title weather. I'm going to add in a link tag. That's a rel to my style sheet. And the href is going to point right to my style.css. And I know I'm going to need Bootstrap, but Smart Me already has Bootstrap already in this file. And I know I'm also going to need my material icons, my material symbols for the icons. So I'm going to take both of these link tags and copy them. I'm then going to come over to my weather and make sure they are pasted above my style.css. So I save on that. And I'm going to give you guys just a minute to catch up on that. We've got 2 link tags. Those came in from our index.html. We also added in our link tag to our style.css file. And all of that is going in a new file that we called weather.html.
We're continuing to use the same style.css file.
We're going to use the same style.css. And that is, I don't want to say uncommon, but I also don't want to say it's particularly common. So it's really up to you. If the styling from your previous page is very similar to the styling that you're using on this page, you can continue to use that same exact style.css. Some web developers really hate that approach and make a different CSS file for every page. Some developers will actually split it. They'll have one called style.css that they do use on every page, and then they'll load in a separate CSS file for each individual page as well to kind of split out the styling. Either approach is fine. In this one, because we want the body to be the same and a lot of the styling to carry through, we're just going to keep on using that one style.css across both pages. Okay, so I'm going to head back to my homepage, and when I click Make It Rain, it's just moving me back up the page. Well, that's annoying. I want it to actually take me over to that page. So to pull that off, I'm going to head back to my index.html. I'm going to scroll down until I find that text that says Make It Rain. And in the href here, I'm going to take out the # and put in weather.html. So just like an img src tag, where we can reference other files in the same folder, we can accomplish that here. So I'm going to put in my weather.html and hit save on that. And now when I come over to my browser and click Make It Rain, it takes me to this blue screen. If it did not take you to a blue screen, check to make sure you got your 3 link tags in properly. If it took you to an error message, make sure your file is called weather.html and you've got weather spelled right in the href. It should take you to a blank screen, the same color as your background. We don't have any content in there yet. So if you've got a blank page that's the same as your background on the previous page, you're good to go. Anyone need help or just a minute? Yep. 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, anyone need help before we keep going?
Yeah, mine's not showing up either. I don't know why.
Share screen, let's take a look. Everything looks right there. Let me take a look at your weather.html. Okay, everything looks right there. So what's happening in the browser? Okay, so I would stop your live share and restart it because your href, I think, looked all right on that. Can you take me back to your code?
Yeah. Switch it back.
Let me see your go live, I notice, is not live.
I thought okay, it's working. Never mind.
Okay.
That's funny.
Shannon, are you caught up or you need help?
I'm trying to catch up. I just don't know where I am.
Okay, so couple steps that we did. We made a new file called weather.html. We went back to our index.html and took 3 links from the top. This link for the bootstrap, this link for the material icons, and this link for our style.css. So highlight all 3 of those and copy. Head over to our weather.html and we hit our exclamation point enter to get our template in here. And then I pasted in the 3 link tags right here.
So let's see, where are they linked?
In index, it's the 3 link tags up in the head. On mine, it's
Okay.
line 8 to 18.
Okay, so I'm,
Always just
okay, I think I've got it.
Okay. And we're pasting those over onto the head tag in our weather.html.
Mhm.
And then the last thing we did is in our index.html, we went down to the text that said make it rain. And we modified the href to say weather.html in here.
Okay, I got that part. All right, I was just missing the pasting. Thank you very much.
No problem. All right. So we got a blank slate, which is nice to work off of. I'm going to look at our final version, and I've got this nav bar up at the top. And you may be tempted to throw a div and get to work on building those out with spans. But I got a trick up my sleeve here. When I pull this over, you notice that this menu icon appears. And when we click on that menu icon, it gives us this nice little animation and makes it so if we click on any of those links, they come in. This is actually using a Bootstrap navbar that we customize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to my Bootstrap documentation. I'm going to go down to the components and I'm going to find my navbar. Now, when I scroll down here, you may be tempted to take this giant, massive 30 lines of code that makes your eyes go cross-eyed just looking at. This is called everything but the kitchen sink. We don't want this. Look at everything that's going on in this nav bar. There's a search, there's a button up here, there's a drop down, there's some disabled buttons so we can't click on them. This is great if you need the Mercedes-Benz, the Aston Martin, the whatever of nav bars. We don't need something that complicated. And working with all of this HTML, we could hack away at it, but chances are we're going to delete a closing tag that we shouldn't have deleted, or we're going to run into trouble. So instead of starting with a very complicated version and paring it down to get to what we want, I'm going to scroll down a little bit and I go, all right, now we went a little too basic. I need more than just my nav bar in there. I need some links to show up. Well, I don't need an image. I don't need image and text. And then I get down to here and I'm like, okay, well, that's still a decent amount of HTML, but this actually looks pretty close to what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the little copy to clipboard icon. I'm going to come back over to my weather. And before I paste all of it in, I'm going to throw in a container. Why am I throwing in a container? Because the final version of the site you can see is constrained, right? We don't spill out to the edges like a fluid. We keep it nice and contained in there. So I'm going to put in my div class container, and then I'm going to paste in all of that code. So inside my container, all of this is coming in from my Bootstrap. Again, where I found that is in Bootstrap. Over in the left side, I scroll down to components into navbar. And the example that I'm taking is the one that's from something that says nav. So we are avoiding the kitchen sink. We are avoiding just the brand. We don't need an image. We don't need an image and text. But this nav bar, this is what I'm looking at, right? This is how I'm finding it. I'm going, this one looks the way that I want it to. So I'm going to come down and hit this copy to clipboard, come back over here, make my div class container, and then paste in that nav bar. So I'm going to pop back over, and I've got my nav bar in there. And it's not the background color that I want, but it's a good starting point. So I'm going to work on this. I'm going to say, hey, that nav bar brand is going to say Max Matthews. And when I click on that, I want it to take me back to my index.html. Then I'm not going to touch this button because this has something to do with a toggle and a collapse, and I'm just going to let that be. I'm going to come down to my home, and I'm going to take a look, and I'm going to say, all right, I do want a home. I also want an about, a contact, and a portfolio. I'm going to take out my disabled, save, come back over, and now I've got my name, my home, about, contact, and portfolio. Don't get overwhelmed here because I know it's a ton of code that we just dropped in. So break it down step by step. Say, all right, I'm going to head to Bootstrap. I need to find the right section of code first of all. That's the most important. So I am going to go down and find the nav bar that looks like this. This is the most basic looking one that still has my links. So I'm going to copy that snippet. I'm going to head back to my code. I'm going to put this in a container. And once I'm in that container, I'm going to paste and letter it. All of that code just right onto the page. Then I need to be very specific about what I'm editing here. It's going to say the word brand here, and I don't want the word brand there. I want my name to go there. Then I'm going to ignore all the other complicated HTML. I want to see what's on the page here, and I'm going to modify those links to line up with the 4 links that I want: home, about, contact, and portfolio. Anyone need help? Doesn't look pretty on our page right now, but we're getting somewhere.
Max.
Yep.
What am I copy and pasting? I found the nav bar on Bootstrap. I just missed what you had highlighted.
Over on the right side where it says on this page, click on nav. And then there's this example that's got like the nav bar and the 4 links. That's what you want to hit the clipboard on.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Jen, it was probably you just copied the wrong one off the Bootstrap website, which is fine. You can take it from my code. That's also fine.
Well, I wasn't getting the same one you got on the Bootstrap website. I'm just getting a bunch of nav bars like the one you actually have on your thing. For like, I'm just finding the nav bars with the 3 bars on the right hand side. There's like the whole bunch of them.
Oh, expand out your window a little bit.
Okay.
All right, so I'm looking at my, does anyone need another minute? Okay, so I'm looking at my nav bar, and the first thing that's glaringly obvious to me is that this is white and this is blending into my color scheme. So I'm going to go back to the documentation. I'm going to go down to this section called color schemes, and I'm going to find out that the way that I've been teaching this for the past 4 years is now completely changed. And what we're supposed to do is add this dark in instead. All right, let's see how far this goes off the rails. So I'm going to take this data BS theme equals dark. This is a real load of BS in here that they've changed this on me, but let's find out what happens. I'm going to paste this in here and hit save. And when I come back over, my nav bar is a nice darker color. Now you'll notice that it not only changed the background for me, it also updated my link colors to be closer to what I want. So now the last thing I have to do is in my CSS, I'm going to target my nav bar and make the background color on that this color blue. And of course that isn't going to work. So I'm going to have to kind of hack it. Bootstrap is like, no, you told me that you want a dark theme. I'm going to make that background black. And I'm like, well, I don't want it black. So I not only set in my background color here, I also use this CSS property called important. And I am sure a CSS wizard would start sobbing to see that that's how I use this. But this is a way to say override other CSS. This is the most important CSS value that you're applying. Ignore anything else. This is the important one to use. Important is kind of like a trump card, right? It's like an override. It's saying, hey, I don't care what Bootstrap told you to do. This is what I want the color to be. So come over here. I've got my nav bar in, feeling pretty good about this. But why did we use all of this Bootstrap code in the first place? Why didn't we just build out this nav bar ourselves? Well, that was because of the mobile responsiveness, right? If I drag this window over, I get my nice little menu icon. And I'm like, yay, mobile responsive. And I click on that little menu and nothing happens. and I'm going to be like my mother and click on it 15 times and still nothing is happening. Okay. Well, I bring it back out and everything looks the way that I want and it's showing up. Does anyone have any guesses as to why it's not doing this like it's supposed to?
Because we have not linked them to anything.
No, because we still have our A tags in here. What we need to do is head back to Bootstrap and go all the way back to the very first thing that we learned to do in Bootstrap, which is installing it. So I'm going to go back to the getting started, back to the introduction. I'm going to go down to this link tag, and we're just going to scan through this really quickly. Well, our meta UTF-8, we know that that lets us do emoji and other characters. This viewport is what does our mobile responsiveness. And if I look up here, we've got our viewport in here. We've got our title for the page. This link tag is the same link tag that we put in here. We close out the head, we go into the body, we've got this H1. Son of a biscuit, what is this script tag going on down here? This is JavaScript. Now, we're not going to have to write any JavaScript to make any of this work. It turns out that Bootstrap is not only a CSS framework, Bootstrap requires some JavaScript under the hood in order to make some CSS functionality work the way that we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this script tag all the way over. You'll notice there's a closing script tag at the end. We also want to get that. If you want to copy it from my code too, that's fine. We're going to go all the way down to the bottom of our code, right before the closing body, and I'm going to paste that script tag in. Again, from the docs introduction, I went down to number 2. I grabbed this script tag, copied it, then came back over to my weather, went all the way down to that last closing body tag, and pasted that script in. Now I save, I come back over, I shrink my window down to the point where I've got my little menu icon. And when I click on my menu icon, I now have my slider working.
How come we're adding it to the bottom instead of up at the top where the other link tags are?
That is a great question. So we load these link tags up at the top because they are controlling the load of the page, right? We don't really want to display our page without Bootstrap or without the icons. So we put them up in the head section. But what we want to do is show our entire page. And once the page is loaded in, then go out and grab that JavaScript and make it interactive. So the JavaScript is kind of less important than the styling tags. And so we put it all the way down at the bottom so the browser loads that last. That's not to say it won't work elsewhere, but this is, according to page load optimization, the best place to put it. Goggin, what's up?
Why is it mine is working, but it's like in two different places?
You have probably got something wrong with your structure in your nav. And that is a very easy thing to do. So go through and just make sure that all of your classes line up with what's going on in your Bootstrap. So one thing that could be wrong is if you don't have all of these links in a div that says collapse, navbar collapse, that could be causing the problem.
Everything looks fine.
Sure, let's take a look.
Yeah, 1 second. Maybe this one, but let's see. Nope. All right. This is gonna be something stupid. I know this. Let's see. You see it?
Nope. Oh,
no.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. You're good. Okay, so Okay, so you've got your collapse icon is not in the right spot. So let's see. You should have your container fluid. You've got a container. Okay. Okay, so container, navbar expand. Okay, all of that looks fine. Then you've got your container fluid, which you should have. Then you've got your nav brand and the button with the span. And then after the button,
Is that too fast?
go back over.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Bruce.
Yeah, all that's fine. So scroll back over to the left. Span, close your button. Then you've got your nav bar collapse. Your nav should be a UL.
Navbar
Okay, so where did you pull this from?
from Bootstrap.
Show me.
Right. He. Wait, hold on. 1 second. Navbar.
So you notice how those are
Okay.
ULs with LIs?
Oh. Wait.
So
Hmm.
this is a good word of warning for everyone. Whenever you get on Bootstrap documentation, always make sure that you see the 5.3 up in the top, because Google is notorious for linking you to old versions of Bootstrap that have a different way of structuring the code. So it's very possible that you just like did a search for like
I think I picked up this one right here.
Okay.
It looks the same, kind of. Doesn't it? Oh no, these are link tags.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
So I would just take that other one and go from there. The other thing is that if you wrote any of your own style.css that targeted anything called nav or navbar, that could also be causing a problem.
I only did this one right here.
You don't have anything up?
Nope. No navbar at all. This is the first one I did. I don't see anything. Nope.
Okay, yeah. That shouldn't cause an issue then.
All right, so this one right here has to go up. Let's see. Should work.
Wait,
right?
look at your code though. Did you have two of them or did you just delete?
I just deleted it. I just pasted it on top of it.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Still.
All right, my guess is there's one more thing I can do to check. Oops, sorry, let me go back into mouse mode. My other guess is, why can I not control your screen? I didn't request it.
It just now did it.
Here. Okay, the only other thing that I can think of is in your style, you're targeting this button and you've got a width of 100%.
Oh.
And so whatever you were doing on this button, I would instead add like an ID that says send.
Okay.
And then target that here. Oops. And so that's a really good example of you want to be careful about targeting a generic HTML element unless you're being specific on it, because now that got applied to every button on
Every
the
button.
page.
Yep. That
So
makes
that did it.
that was stupid. I mean, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone else good? Everyone else have a nice little clicking? Okay, so while we're in here, we're going to finish this up. When I click on my contact, it doesn't do anything. When I click on my about, it doesn't do anything. Well, that's because I didn't specify in these A tags where to go. So I'm going to say, hey, when you want to get to the home page, go to index.html. When you go to the about page, I still want to go to index.html, but I want to go to the about section. So if we use the pound sign or the hashtag here, we can specify what ID it should scroll me to on that page. So I'm going to say index.html contact. And finally, my last portfolio link needs an href index.html portfolio. So I save that. I come back over here, and this is annoying, but it's important to test all of your links anytime you modify one of them. I click on home, it takes me to the right section. So I go back and I click on about, and about takes me down to the about section. I go back, I click on contact. Contact takes me to contact. Finally, I'm going to click portfolio. That brought me down to the bottom. I click my make it rain button. It takes me back here, and I am all caught up. So 4 links that I changed. My first link goes to index.html, and then the other 3 still go to index.html, but they take me to specific sections on the page. Nav bars by far are one of the hardest things to build as a developer, because they have to be very responsive and they're core to your entire site. And unfortunately, because they're at the top of the page, usually they're the first things that you try to build. So nav bars are something that are really tricky to build, and you can build them from scratch, but it's something to consider. Hey, can I find a Bootstrap nav bar that looks close to what I want? Because Bootstrap is going to have a ton of stuff built in, like this responsiveness, so that I get the little drop-down effect going on for me. So that's something to consider when you're building out a site, is can I use the Bootstrap pre-built components? Plush, what's up?
So I'm just curious, for websites with like 50 web pages or something, we have to have that nav barcode on every single page of the website?
Until you learn React, yes, you would have to copy and paste. That is one of the biggest downfalls and complaints of HTML. Of, hey, I want to make one nav bar and I want to put that nav bar on all 50 pages. The only way to do that is to copy the 40 lines of that div and paste it in a bunch of different locations. So when we get to React, we're going to learn how to do something called componentizing, which is turning a section of code into one component that we can reuse that component across multiple different pages. So we will be getting into that and some more advanced routing techniques and template layouts. That's all coming down the pipeline once we get into React, which we need JavaScript for. So it's kind of dominoes that will fall into place.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. And I wish I had a better answer for you.
For some reason, I have the rest of them showing up, but they're all good. My contact, whenever I click that, it just takes me back home. I don't know why.
Okay, so the problem might not be in your link. Go to your index.html, go find your contact section, and make sure you've got an ID of contact on it.
Oh God.
Don't you hate it when I'm right? So that is a good thing to note. The only way that these links know where to go is by having an ID on the section. So that's what we're linking to, are these specific IDs on here.
I had a capital C in my ID and a lowercase c in my my reference.
That will do it. Anyone need another minute or need any help?
Max, have you checked the chat?
Oh, home should be taking you back to just your regular homepage. So I just have index.html with nothing after it, and that's just going to take me to the top of the page.
Bootstrap is not that bad at all. Now that we are using it more.
To try and layer it in, because we've had some instructors say that you're cheating the students out of a full HTML knowledge. And I'm like, well, I know what it takes to build a nav bar from scratch, and I don't think any of you want to do that. So here's pre-written code. And
I mean,
also, by the way, a lot of the internet uses Bootstrap as well.
I mean, like for like obviously basic knowledge that, you know, like the attributes and stuff like that, you should know them. And we did learn them with the bootcamp, free bootcamp, whatever. But at the end of the day, we are not gonna be there making a whole nav bar when we can just use like, you know, Bootstrap or like even React. When we get there, we're gonna be like, you know, it's gonna be easy, but it's gonna be more complex.
Yes.
So that's gonna be the concept of learning like, you know, complex things and like making them easy.
There is a quote about how the best leaders stand on the shoulders of giants. In other words, we use people who have come before us and use them to elevate us. And that is what a true developer does, is take someone who is a CSS wizard and knows how to create this all from scratch, and then use their code to make our code easier to write. And that's really what any framework is. And there are always pros and cons to using a framework and learning it and using it as a crutch, but I don't think of it as a crutch. I think of it as a tool in my toolbox. And why would I try and hammer in a nail or hammer in a screw when it's a screwdriver that really needs to get the job done? And so that's what I look at Bootstrap as, is, you know, hey, I don't need to reinvent the screw here. I can just take my screwdriver out and use it.
Yep, that was a good one.
All right, we're ready to move on here. Good news is this is all of our copy and paste. Everything else from here is going to be a recap on everything else. So I'm going to head back over to my final site, and I've got something up here that has my weather app. But I'm realizing that this section is probably going to be different than my footer on this. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to find the end of my nav bar. And instead of using just another generic div, I'm going to use another semantic HTML tag called main. And this is just like section. We could use section. It would do the exact same thing. But main is meant to differentiate it out. Hey, is this kind of the nav? Is this the footer? Or is this the main content of your page? So it works just like a div does. We're just trying to layer in more accessibility. From there, I'm going to drop in maybe an H2, maybe an H1 is a little aggressive. So let's do an H2. And I'm going to say this is my weather app. So I save that. I take a look in my browser, and that's not pretty. So I'm going to head back over to my style.css. I'm going to target my main section. Now be careful here. If you had mains on different pages, this would apply to all of the mains that load style.css. In this case, that's okay, because this is the only page that is going to have a main. So I'm able to target that. However, if you wanted your weather page to have a different styling than other project pages, it would certainly be better to put an ID on this main to prevent that styling from applying everywhere. In this case, it is okay for me to target my main. So I'm going to do two things inside of there. Actually, three things. I'm going to set my background to a particular color. That color I have pre-selected out of my palette, so I can go ahead and use that. I'm going to set my font color to white, and I'm going to just take a stab at this and say, hey, I want some breathing room around my content. So I'm going to add some padding in 30 px. Now you may be looking at this and sorry, Brandy, I just saw your message. Prioritize div. Is that, were you referring to like the main?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily prioritizing it. It's just describing it for a screen reader to say, hey, there are three sections on this page, a nav, a main, and a footer. And when it's reading the screen out to someone who might be visually impaired, instead of just saying, and here's another generic section, it's going to say the main section of this page starts with the text weather app.
Okay. All right. Makes sense.
During the break, I'm actually going to try and turn on the screen reader. I'm not sure if I can do that or not, but I'm going to try and turn on the accessibility so you can get an idea of what it reads out loud for someone who is using a screen reader. Okay, so I got my H2 in here. I've got some breathing room around it. Now, it may be tempting to look at this and say, oh, I want to set a height on it so that there's enough area to put in all of my content. You don't want to do that with responsiveness, because look at the height of my window right now and look at what happens when I drag it in. Because I've made this responsive, this area becomes much taller. So we almost never want to set a static height on a div because we want the content to control that height and automatically grow based off of the text and the screen size. So just be careful on setting a height on any div or HTML element other than maybe an image, because we want the browser to do that calculation and figure it out for us. Okay, so I've got my H1 in. And before I dive into this, I say, hold up, what am I noticing here? I notice that this content goes across the page, and this is broken up right here into columns. And on top of those columns, I also have other columns in here. So I've got rows and I've got columns in here. So those are all things I'm going to have to take care of. This to me looks like it's one big column here, and then we have our subcolumns showing up in here. So that's something we're going to have to watch in our div soup to make sure that we can accomplish the layout the way that we want. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to say, all right, I've got my weather app in. I'm going to make my div class row, and I'm doing that with my period ROW enter, and that's using Emmet for my autocomplete. I'm then going to come in here and make a call 4, because it looks like this is taking up 25% of the screen, and 4 divided by, oh, sorry, this looks like it's taking up, what's 4 divided by 12? A third of the screen, and this looks like it's taking up 2/3 of the screen. So if I wanted it 25%, I would use a 9 and a 3, but I want 1/3 and 2/3. So I'm going to use a 3, I'm sorry, a 4 and an 8. Does that make sense? So I've got my 4 in here, and I'm just going to say IMG goes here. And then I'm also going to create my call 8, and I'm going to say text goes here. I'm going to save those. I'm going to come back over and take a look, and it looks like my image is taking up enough space that my text also has the right ratio. right? It looks like those are set up for the right spots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle my image first. I'm going to do an IMG tag with an SRC, and I'm going to use the same one that I used on my index.html. So that is this weather app.png. I'll also put that in the chat. So if you want to pull the image from there, you can. So I'm going to throw that image in there and close out my tag. I'm going to save it. Come back over here, and I got a huge image. So we actually know how to solve for that. We just add a class on the image of IMG fluid, and that's going to shrink it down to the right size. Then the only other thing that I'm noticing is, hey, this image doesn't quite look as nice as this image. That comes down to just a little rounding. So I'm going to say, hey, in my main section, go find an image, and in that image, put a border radius on it of 10 pixels. I save, I get my nice little rounded, and I'm good to go. I'm gonna pause there. I know that was a lot of code. Once you get it working, take a breather, go back through, parse that code, make sure you're grokking it, make sure that you're understanding why we did it the way that we did.
So what did the image fluid did? Just
Made it fit inside the column that it was inside.
Okay.
So without an image fluid, it will always be the resolution of the image itself, regardless of where you put the IMG tag. And so the image fluid is what makes it say, hey, width 100% of the column that you're in.
okay. So why is it mine is not getting some? Oh, hold on. Nope, it's not working.
You have IMG fluid spelled right?
Yeah, IMG fluid. Yep.
And you got it added as a class to the image directly.
Yes, in the image section. Yeah.
Share screen.
Oh, hold on. I did something else. All right, here you go. Everything is broken lightly. I don't know what the hell is going on.
Call for, you have fluid spelled wrong. You have a fluid.
Oh man, I'm tired, man. Woke up too early today. All right, that's the only one.
I think that will fix it. There you
All
go.
right, there you go. But why is it so small now? Oh, because of the size.
Just because of your size. Yeah, if you drag that out, it'll
Oh,
get
okay.
bigger.
All right.
So there's a question, why did I use border instead of padding to make the image fit in the screen better? The border radius isn't actually, I didn't actually apply a border to it. I just put a radius on where a border would go. So this border radius, all that it's doing is if I comment that out, and you take a look over here, I've got sharp corners on the side of it. Whenever we want to round out an element, we use border radius to do that. So if I put that border radius back in and hit save, it just rounds out those corners, which makes
The
it
screen share is
feel,
off.
oh. I really need to set up like warning lights that like start going off. Okay. Border radius is rounding out this image right here. So if I just comment that out or disable that section of code, you can see the image is just square there. The border radius just gives it a little bit of a rounding out. So if I wanted that image to be further down on the page or be indented in the column, that's when I would use padding. What actually got the sizing to work was this class image fluid. So if I take that out, you'll see my image is huge. What the image fluid is doing is applying it, is saying, hey, be a fluid inside this col 4. Don't get any bigger than the col that you're in. And so when I save that, that's what actually does the sizing down for me. Now, that's not to say that I wouldn't use padding. If I wanted the arrows to show up underneath it, that's when I would use margin or padding to move that content around. But in this case, the image fluid is what's doing the sizing for me, which is falling onto the column system, the grid system to do that. And then I use the border radius just to round out the corners on the images.
So the fluid is a property of what, Bootstrap?
Bootstrap.
Okay,
Yep.
that's why it makes sense.
And that would be covered under their utilities section, I hope. If you go to layout and utilities, nope, I was wrong. Images. It is under images. They have the IMG fluid, and then they give you an explanation of what it does. Plush, what's up?
I'm just curious about one thing, and I'm sorry if you've explained this. For example, we copied image fluid class from Bootstrap and just applied it to an element. If we go into our CSS and apply more properties to image fluid, say add a border or like anything, or we make changes to say navbar, does it like apply it in addition to what it already has, or
It does. And that's why CSS is called cascading style sheets, because whatever styles that you apply on top of it will cascade in addition to whatever styles are already applied in other classes. And so that is a totally valid thing to do. If you wanted to say, I want every image on my site to not only be image fluid, but to have a border of 2 pixels solid fuchsia, that will not only apply to your weather, that will also apply to, oh, maybe they just don't have image fluid on them. I take it back. If those had image fluid on them, that would show up there as well. That is okay to do as long as you're doing it sparingly, as long as you know, hey, I'm modifying a Bootstrap class, and wherever I use that Bootstrap class and load in this style sheet, that is going to apply. This is totally valid to do, just something you want to be careful about doing because it is a Bootstrap class.
Right. So with the navbar, when you added the color, the background color, and added exclamation point important,
Yep.
That could have been done without that, or you did that just to show us?
Yes. It is tricky because I don't know where, if I take that important out, I don't know where Bootstrap is applying the color in the first place. I would have to dig around. So they added this BG body tertiary. And I think if we applied it on that, nope. I don't know why I know why. It's because they overrode it with important. So because they're using important, we also have to use important in ours as well.
Understood. That's
I
really
have no idea why they're using important, because they're probably cascading over another part of their code. And the only way to get that background to apply is if they use important. So we have to use important because they used important.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Glad I found an answer to that question, because I certainly did not have it at the beginning. Jen, what's up?
Can you change the text color in the navbar?
You can. It's going to be a similar thing where you have to be careful about where you're applying it. So if we try it in navbar, it won't work because those are A tags in there. So you would have to target the A tags in the navbar. So if we say navbar and then the A tag and then make the color pink,
Okay.
that will work for you. That's certainly a look, but it is working. You could also target navlink, and that should also accomplish the same thing.
I have a fat white box going around my nav bar.
Okay. If you're caught up, go on break, be back at 7:25. I will stick around for questions. Go ahead and share your screen.
What the fuck did I just do?
Great time for you to not be on mute, Jen.
Oh, whoops, sorry.
fine.
Yeah, so I don't know what I did here, but it's
Yeah,
I got
take me to
part
your
of it.
code.
All right, let me. Oh shit, what's going on here? My thing like minimized in a corner, so I can't. How do I? Oh, there it is. Okay.
I hate it when you can't find the stop share button and you're like, I know I'm still sharing my screen. Where is it?
I know. Where is it?
Okay, so first things first, you've got container spelled wrong on 21.
Yo, oh, I didn't. Yo, that's crazy.
I don't think that's your problem, unfortunately.
No.
So you applied your background with an ID of nav, and I don't love that. So let me request my remote. So instead of adding an ID of nav here, what I did is I applied my background to this nav element. And so to do that, I don't use a period or pound sign. Did that fix it?
No, I just made it white.
Great, even better. Okay, so we also have to add in something here called important, because HTML, because Bootstrap used important as well. Did that fix it?
No way.
Okay.
I've been playing with this for a minute.
Okay. I lied. I
Oh,
didn't
dude.
target the nav. I targeted the nav bar. No. The nav bar class right here.
Oh, so that makes more sense. All right.
So
thanks.
here's why I had to do that. Because Bootstrap put the background color on the nav bar, this nav bar is more specific than just this nav. So I kind of have to go I have to go toe for toe with Bootstrap and make sure what I'm overriding is at the same place that they set it.
Gotcha.
And overriding Bootstrap is an art, right? Like sometimes you got to play around with it to get the right selector.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
No problem. Do you have any other questions?
No, that's good.
Cool.
That's the only thing I couldn't get working.
Cool. Jen, did you need some help?
No, I just deleted one of my the main box and I had to redo it.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
No problem. Last call for help before I go on break. Okay. So I'm pretty happy with everything showing up here. I'm coming back over to my site and I'm taking a look, and it looks like we've got a div up here, but I don't necessarily need a column for that, right? I don't need a row because I don't have any columns. I'm just going down the page. But right here, I do need columns for the left and right sides. So I am going to get my summary working first, and then I'm going to tackle a row for these two columns. So I am going to figure out where I'm at in my code. I've got my text goes here. That's what I want to start working with. So I am going to do a H4. No, not a J4, an H4. And I'm going to put my word in there that says summary. And then I'm going to do a little P tag that says weather app that includes the format using Bootstrap grid. Obviously, you don't need to follow me word for word here. You're welcome to put in whatever text you would like. I come over here. I've got my summary. I've got my text. I'm feeling pretty good about that. All it took was an H4 and a P tag. Then I look at my design and I go, all right, I've got something on the left and something on the right. That must mean columns. So I'm going to come still inside my col 8. You know what? We're getting div soup here. Let's add in some comments. End of content column of words for project. I'm going to come inside there and do a new row. And then in that row, I'm going to do 2 columns. And I'm just going to leave a placeholder in here. So I'm going to do an H4 and say objectives. And I'm going to add my note in that says end of objectives div. Come outside of that, add in another call. And that is going to be an H4 for my future improvements. And I'm going to add a note in there that says end of future improvements div. I save, come back over, I take a look. My objectives are at the right spot and my future improvements are at the right spot. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. This is feeling fast. That's okay. Take a step back, read through the HTML before you code it out, right? Make sure you understand, okay, why didn't we have to put this in a row? Why is this not in its own div? Because we didn't need to go across the screen for any layout. We just wanted to throw that content in there. Then we got to this section of the screen and we said, wait, we've got content on the left and content on the right. In order to pull that off, we're going to do a row with 2 equal size columns. Why do we need this closing div here? Because this closing div is going to say we've reached the bottom of this column. We now need to come back up and work on this column. So what we're essentially looking at here is one big div. This is all our col 8 because this over here is our col 4. From there, we got our summary in, we got our weather app in, and then we said we're going across, so we need to tackle this here as a row. And then inside that row, we're going to have 2 columns, one for our objectives and another for our future improvements. We're going to take that same approach down for the links. We're going to come outside of this row and we're going to create another row right here. And in that row, we're going to do our 2 columns right down the center. So once we get our objectives showing up, I am totally going to cheat here and copy and paste mine. So I'm going to find the text objectives. I'm going to make sure I'm still inside the end of the objectives divs. And I'm going to put in a UL tag with a bunch of LIs. Also going to do that for the future improvements. I'm going to go find my future improvements. Again, this is all about cursor placement. You notice that I never struggle with div soup. That's because I'm going right to the content. And before I'm figuring out where those closing divs are, I'm putting my cursor at the end of it. If I'm following along here, when I put my cursor at the end, I should still be inside this div. So even though I've got some closing divs here that aren't labeled, I can stay on top of it as long as I'm making sure my prettier still has a check mark and that I'm watching the inside of the content. So I save that, I come back over, and boom, I've got my bullet points. So don't just code along with me for the pace of coding along with me. Say, all right, what is Max doing right now? He's adding in those bullet points. Where do those bullet points go? Okay, once I figure that out, let me load up a UL. Let me load up those LIs. Stop. Go back over to the browser. Did it load where you wanted it to? If it did, great, you can keep going. If you didn't, don't just steamroll through, figure out where those closing tags are to pull all of this off. Yes, question. Yes, Rain, go ahead with your question. Sorry, I missed a word there. Yes, an array in JavaScript is a list of data. HTML uses a UL for an unordered list as a parent element, and then LIs for list items. Yes. An array in JavaScript is not quite the same thing as an LI in HTML. We may use an array in HTML to generate out our HTML of list items, but an array in JavaScript isn't quite the same. All right, anyone need help? Anyone need a minute before we wrap this site up?
I see the objectives, practices, yes, the layout, bootstrap. Okay. So it's 4 of them. I'll put the things.
Five objectives, 3 future improvements. And the reason why I'm using those is that this is exactly what I want to see when I'm hiring someone. This is what I want to see on their portfolio sites. I want to know why they built the project. I want to know what they would do next on the project. I want to know what the overall project is. I want to see a screenshot of it, right? All of those requirements are listed out. And there's not a hard and fast list that every portfolio needs to have these items, but this is what I'm looking for when I hire someone. If I'm going on your website, I want to know what you've built and what you've built it with, and why you built it, and what you would work on next on that project. Okay, I'm going to finish this up. We've got our links section and we've got our tech stack section. So I'm going to say, all right, I've got div soup here. Where do I want this to go? I want this to go after the row that has the objectives and the future improvements. The easiest place to find that is going to go up to my objectives. I don't want it in as another column in that row. I want it to be another row. So I'm going to click on my div class row. I'm going to scroll all the way down until I see where that closing div is. And I am going to say end of objectives and future improvements row. That means that if I make a new row here, this is also going to have a call that says links, and that's going to be an H4. And I'm going to have another call that's got an H4 for my tech stack. Now I'm feeling pretty confident that I did that right, but I'm not going to keep coding. I'm going to switch back over here and make sure my links and my tech stack are showing up in the right spot. So got them all lining up. I'm going to come back here, and now I've got these buttons going on here. Now I could build them from scratch, or I could use Bootstrap for them. So if I take a look, where else have I used a button? If I go to my home page, I've got buttons happening in the Make It Rain, in the Send, in the Get Streaming, all of those. So what I'm going to do is go look at that code. I'm going to hit Command F in my VS Code, and I'm going to search for my button. And when I find that button, I notice it's got the class BTN and BTN primary. Well, I can reuse those. So I'm going to take the button, copy this whole thing, go back to my weather, and paste in one of those buttons. And this, I'm going to say demo. I'm going to see how that looks. So I head back to my Make It Rain page, and I've got my demo button showing up. I can reuse that as well. I think I've got a link to my GitHub or my code. So I'm going to just put in GitHub for now, save, and now I've got 2 buttons for my links. Using the power of Bootstrap there, reusing those buttons. Now I've got my 2 links showing up. All right, let's take this home. The last thing I have is my tech stack. So I'm going to head back over to Bootstrap, and I'm going to take a look, and let's just peruse here. Let's see if we can find anything. So I'm going to look at a badge. This badge, I actually did not think that's what this was called. Okay, this is what we want, right? This has the same little effect going on there. And all I need to do is use this class of badge. So I'm going to head back over. I'm going to put in a span tag. I'm going to say HTML. I'll put a space in there and do another span and say CSS and save that. Go back over to my code. And there are my words, but they don't look like anything. Well, all we need to do is add a class onto both of them of badge. Whoops. And save, and I come back over, and okay, we're getting in the right direction. It doesn't have a background on them though. So I've got to go back to my Bootstrap, and it shows me, hey, I've got to specify a background. And there are all different things that I can do with that, but the BG secondary looks like what I want. So I'm going to apply that to both of them. Save. Come back, and there are my little badges. Now, if I don't like the color of them, I can always head to my CSS, target that BG secondary, and make the background color on them. Let's go for solid black. BG color black important. And there they are in black. Or you could say, I don't want to use Bootstrap. I want to make those myself. Just as an example, you can pick either one to use here. I'm going to copy these, and one very common thing to see is commented out code. Let me show you what happens here. I'm going to highlight both of these lines and hit Command/ and hit save. You notice that's gone. Well, this is the equivalent of deleting the code, but I'm still leaving it in here in case I want to reference it. So this is a very common way to test snippets of your code and say, all right, pretend like these aren't in here for a second. What does the page look like? So I'm going to leave those in there. And instead, I'm going to add my own class onto that. Let me call this a stack. I can achieve the exact same thing Bootstrap did and have more control over it. Maybe I want padding of 3 pixels around the whole thing. I want a background color of black. and I want a little border radius of 5 pixels. I save that, I come over here, and everything works except my border. I wanted a background color on that, not a border color. That achieves a similar effect, and we can keep going there, right? We could say font weight is bold. Maybe we increase this padding to 5 pixels, and then we get a similar effect to what Bootstrap was giving us. So 2 different approaches there. We can use something that's pre-built, like this badge from Bootstrap, or we can create our own class and build it out ourselves in our CSS. Really depends. Some developers like to build everything from scratch, so they've got complete control over it. Other developers like to build out their whole site and then go back through and tweak that Bootstrap styling to be more their color, more their palette. Either one is totally fine.
Or like if it was a copyright issues thing and you wanted like, that's what you mean by complete control. So like, let's say I built a website and it was using like Bootstrap, like foundations and stuff, and then it became really popular. Like what happens then?
Great question. So Bootstrap and almost all software that is open to the public has a license with it. And that license basically tells you what you can and can't do with it. So if we head over to the Bootstrap docs and I do a search for license, it will give you a whole breakdown about how you can use Bootstrap. And it basically says that you have to keep the license and copyright notice included in Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript files when you use them in your works. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means if someone goes into our site and hits view page source and clicks on this Bootstrap, you'll see up at the top, it actually says copyright 2011 to 2023, licensed under MIT. Well, what does that mean? If we pop open the link to this, it's going to give you a license. This happens to be called the MIT license, that tells you up at the top, they give you a summary on it. And they basically say that you're allowed to use this for commercial use. You're allowed to make your own modifications to it, changing colors and whatever. But it does not give you a warranty. So if Bootstrap breaks, you can't go back to Bootstrap and say, Bootstrap, you broke my website. Well, that's what a warranty is. That's not covered. And there's no liability. If someone sues you and says, hey, your site isn't accessible, you can't go back to Bootstrap and say, hey, I'm getting sued because of something wrong in your code. They should be suing you instead. They don't have liability. But there are all different kinds of software licenses. And a little bit later on in the cohort, Jay Balunas is going to come in, who is manager at Red Hat. Red Hat is one of the largest open source software companies, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about licensing and the differences between them and what it means for your code. Great question on that. All right, we are done with this website. Oh, that's not true. I forgot the footer. There's one more thing. Sorry. I've got the footer on mine. We are going to head back over to our index.html, go down to the footer that we have already created, copy that footer, head back to your weather.html, and we want to throw that in after the main tag, but before the closing div for the container. So I'm going to save that. I pop back over. I've got my footer showing up, and now we are done with this. All right, how are we feeling? Take 2 minutes, created a lot of HTML here. Make sure that these concepts are clicking. Go ahead and review this code before we get to the last activity for the evening. All right. Any final questions, any concepts that you would like me to review? Okay. For the final part of class, I'm turning the tables on you guys. Threw me under a bus with YouTube and wanted me to recreate YouTube. Now it's payback time. I would like you to go out, whether it's your favorite website, a website that you use a lot, does not have to be the entire site. I am not asking you to recreate something from scratch, but pick a small section of it and try to recreate that using Bootstrap code. So what I mean by that is I don't need you to tackle the entire nav bar, but if you look at YouTube, right, and you see that section under a YouTube video, just recreate one row of that. Maybe you're a big fan of Reddit and you want to try and get the upvote arrow, the downvote arrow, the vote count, and the whatever the content of the post is. That would be totally fine. This is an individual project, but I'm sticking around to help you guys through it. So spend a couple minutes on the internet and just find a very small section of a page to recreate. Go through the steps, make your new index.html file, go ahead and install your Bootstrap, get your style.css set up, and then pull up that little section of that website and work on recreating it. While you're doing that, I am going to create an assignment in Canvas for this. So the goal is to be done at 8:30. I don't want you guys spending more than 40 minutes trying to do this. That means the smaller the site that you're creating, really hone in on a small little aspect of it. Any
Well, what is
questions?
it? Just the nav bar, kind of?
Any component of the site. Navbar is probably going to be the trickiest, but any site that you use a lot, you can pick any little piece of it, anything, any component, and recreate just that little section.
Max,
Yes.
would this be an ideal time to pair in groups, perhaps?
Yeah, if you want to go into a group, I can put you in a breakout room. Just shoot me a message of who you want to work with, and I can put you into a group.
I
If
thought you
you're
were at random, honestly.
if you're looking for inspiration, creating the Google page is a great option, right? You don't have to tackle the about or the store, but just the Google logo, an input, and 2 buttons. Google is a great idea, right? You can tackle it from there. Or you may say, hey, I'm going to head to YouTube, and it would be nuts for me to try and recreate all of this, but maybe you just recreate an image and there's a little icon and the text underneath it. That's a great idea. If you wanted to, you could even say, all right, I want to recreate this sidebar. I just want to get the 3 icons showing up and the text and maybe a little bit of a hover on it. I'll head over to Zoom. This is a good idea, right? If you wanted to recreate this as a header and a little text underneath it and 2 buttons, that's a good one to recreate. Lots of different ideas for you there. I'm going to poll you guys if you want to pair off in groups of 3, just to see if you want to do that or not. Okay, poll is live. If you would like to be put in groups of 3, go ahead and vote for yes. Otherwise, you can go ahead and vote no. Okay, so there are 6 of you that want to do it in a group and 11 of you that don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 breakout rooms, and you guys can choose to join them if you want, or you can just take it on yourself. So I'm gonna open all rooms. You should have the option to join a breakout room if you want to work on it as a group. Just go ahead and join that group, and I think when someone else sees you in that room, they can also join that room. One person has headed into room 1. If you would like to work on it as a group, you can go into breakout room 1.
Hey, Max, can you put Jill and I in one room?
Sure.
Thank you.
Together or in the room with another student in it?
Either. If you're looking, it doesn't matter, but we were gonna work together. So if
Yeah,
somebody,
sure.
if there's an extra, they can work with us.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you in room 1. Anyone else who wants to tackle this as a group, you can head over to room 1, or if you want to work in a group together, you can go into room 2. I'm around for questions, so if you guys are stuck on something or need me to go over a step, let me know. Can help out.
I'm trying to copy the poll card, the the Zoom poll card that just popped up. I was like, let me see if I can make the poll card like that.
That's a good idea. The bars may be a little challenging, but everything else I think would be a good one.
Yeah, let's see. I'll Google it if I don't find it.
Once you guys are done with the assignment, you can go ahead and upload it in Canvas. Keep in mind, I don't want you working on this after class. Whatever you've got done at 8:30, just go ahead and submit that.
Should we send the code or just this? I don't know. The file, like the whole file. Is he here? Oh, he left, I think.
How are we doing over here? Does anyone need help? Want to screen share? Have a jump start?
Yeah, I'm trying to add this search bar to this for the site I picked, and I'm just having a hard time.
Share screen. Let's take a look.
Let me move the actual live part onto my screen. You'll watch.
Cool.
Hold on. All right, I don't know what's happening. All right, you can skip this somebody else real fast. I'm trying to get my computer's acting crazy.
Anyone else need help?
I've got kind of a good start, but I know I'm not going to finish it by 8:30.
That is fine. I don't want you to keep working on it. I mean, you can if you want to, but just turn in whatever you've got at 8:30. This isn't about recreating like the whole page. It's just getting a little practice, you know, getting your sea legs, so to speak, of recreating something.
All right, Max, how you see it now?
Yep, you're good.
So all right, so this is what I got so far. This is the site. I'm trying to create the nav bar for this.
Okay.
So just that, and then obviously like the magnifying glass.
Okay.
So when I was going here, I know I still ID this as a search bar right here.
Yep, that's fine. You've got kind of two ways of doing it. If you were going only for looks, you could do that with like a border bottom and tackle it from there. Or if you really wanted to go all out, you could also make it an input and then style the input to have, you know, what you're looking for.
So I'll do input, and then what would I put?
So think back to, you can do input type text. And then think back to the contact form. How did we get text to kind of show up inside of that?
Oh, hold on. I wrote that down. Hold on. I'm drawing a blank. I can't find my notes.
You get a placeholder on that.
So what I put on. I can't open my other browser while I'm sharing my screen. But I know what you're talking about though. I just gotta look at it.
Here, I'll give you a little boost. So we're going to do our, I'm just going to search by artist, I'm going to say. So I'm going to put a placeholder in here. And I'm going to say search by artist. And then input tags are usually self-closing. So I save that, I take a look, and now we've got our input in there. But we've got a border around everything, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to target my input and I'm going to say border none. That's going to get rid of the line around it. But then looking at what we're trying to create, there is a border, but it's down at the bottom, right? So what would we do to put that back on there?
So border bottom or
yeah,
and then black for 1P, 1PX, and solid black.
And I think that's actually more of a gray. So let's try that. So I save that. All right, we're on the right track. Now I notice that there's a little bit of space between the border and the text. What would that be?
So that's padding.
So we just throw some padding on there, 15 pixels. All right, we're on the right track. I'm gonna let you take it back over from here.
Okay, that's what I needed. Thank you.
No problem. Sometimes we just need a little boost, right? Hardest part usually is getting started. So once we get a little momentum going, and then you just really get better practice at narrowing in, right? You look at that input and you're like, there are 15 different things here that make that input look wrong. What's the most obvious? All right, the border, right? Let me fix the border. Okay, what's next? All right, maybe it's at the top of the screen. What's that property? Narrowing in one by one is what lets you get the momentum going.
Okay.
Only 2 minutes left. Can I help anyone?
I need help.
Yeah. Sure.
Mm.
Wow, you got a lot going on.
Yeah, so this is okay, I'll show you like what I'm trying to copy really quick. This is the web, this little bar right here.
Okay.
Without this part, without this little thing right here.
Okay.
So this is what I have here. I'm trying to get it. Now, what I did was I added like a row underneath here, which I'm not sure if I should take this out, because if I take it out, what it does is like, oh, dang, it messed it up. Hold on. Let me go back.
So I think you want that row there.
There, I had it like a certain way just a second ago. And it was working. There we go. There we go.
Okay.
There it is.
So container, you've got your 2 columns in that row. Okay, so let me see the source again. Okay, so the way that I would look at this is I would say all of this is one row, and we've got a column here, and we've got a column here.
Okay.
And this to me, I would say this is a 2, this is a 5, and this is also a 5.
Oh, no wonder mines weren't working. Wow. I was doing some bad math.
No, I think you're on the right track, because look, you've got one call, you've got 2 calls, and you've got your 3rd call. So you are on the right track. I would just throw a -2 in here, and then I think you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Do I have to do a -5 on the other ones, or will it just recognize?
It will recognize and space them out.
Ooh, it's looking a lot better now. Okay.
Don't be afraid to visualize, right? And use your tools and say, all right, like, where are my columns? Where are they falling on the screen? And that can sometimes help unlock you for getting the content aligned properly.
Okay, and then so another question I have would be for these like little icons here. For those, would I just like screenshot those and keep them as like a
question. You can kind of cheat. I wouldn't recommend doing this on a production website, but if you right click on them, come on. Oh, you're going to be a pain on me, aren't you? Oh, no.
Oh,
no.
you might just, it reloaded. So you might just have to like do the, yeah.
So if normally I can just right click on an image and hit inspect or hit copy link address. Where are you putting that image? Okay, right here, you see this background? I right click on that and say open in new tab. It opens that tiny little image and I can see the link to the GIF. So I can actually copy that and then come into here and just do a little IMG SRC with that link that we just stole, borrowed. Close that, close that, close that, save. And now we got our little
It looks so cute. Okay, now, so just, okay, one more question. Now for this right here, like this, how it looks here, and then how this is spaced, would that just be CSS or?
Yeah, structuring your HTML really well so that you can target the different pieces of it in the CSS. Yeah, that's how you would accomplish it.
Okay. All
This
right.
is great. That's enough for me to show, hey, I'm getting this. I'm playing around with my columns. I'm understanding the spacing. Like, that's just the point of this assignment, right? Take some little thing and just practice with creating it and getting things laying out the way you want.
Thank you so much.
No problem. All right, I am going to close the breakout rooms.
Now, can I add something like this to my portfolio? I'm sorry, I didn't know I was unmuted.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm about to say, why you over there yelling?
I'm sorry. I'm excited as heck. Like, let me just mute.
I'll mess with you.
When I close breakout rooms, it gives them like a full minute countdown, and there's no way to be like force them all over. It like has to give them the full minute to come out. So welcome back, everyone. I don't want you guys going all out on this, right? This is just a little exercise to give yourself a chance to challenge yourself a little bit and realize, hey, maybe I need to go back through and see how we did this on another project. I don't want you investing all weekend into this or all night into this. So whatever you have so far, that's okay. Go ahead and submit it. If you've got a little bit of stamina here and you're feeling really excited about it, you can definitely keep on working on it and submit it whenever you're ready for feedback on it. But if you got a little taste of it and you're like, okay, now I need a little bit more practice getting started, or I need a little bit more practice reviewing columns, or wherever it's at, that's okay. You don't have to keep on working on this, but if you've got a little stamina, if you're feeling excited about it, if you're feeling that burn of a challenge, you are welcome to keep going on it and just submit it in Canvas whenever you're ready for that feedback. Or you can say, I've gone far enough. I got a little bit of practice on this. Gonna turn this in, and that's also totally okay. Rain, did I see a question?
You did. I'm off mute, right? Okay.
Yes.
Being that we work collectively in the group, the teammate who has most of our input and work on their VS Code, can they submit it on behalf of 4 of us?
There's not an easy way to do like selective group assignments. So what I would suggest is that they Slack the files to you, and then you can upload that copy of the file into Canvas. Only because I don't think I left, you know what, can I edit it? Yes, I can. Never mind. What they can do, whoever submits it for the students, just do in the text entry box, like I worked on this with student A, student B, and student C, and then I'll give you the grade for the whole group. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. And you said keep it basic, right?
Keep it basic. You don't have to keep working on this, right? This is just a little taste. If you want to keep going on it, I'm not going to stop you because I know what it's like to have that objective and want to meet it. And I will also say that this is a great way to do use a one-on-one, right? If you're up to this point and you're like, they keep pushing these one-on-ones, but I don't know why I would use one of them. This is a great idea to say like, hey, this is what I'm trying to recreate. This is what I've got so far, or how would I even get started on this? And I can help you kind of keep going there and figure out where you're at. So if you're interested in a one-on-one, you're also welcome to book it. But again, this is not meant to be an entire weekend project. This is just meant to say, hey, can I go find a little tiny snippet, keep it small, and recreate it? So that is all that I've got for you guys tonight. I will stick around just for a couple minutes in case people have questions, but otherwise have an awesome weekend. And know, coming up next week, Intro to Computer Science. We get a full reset on Monday. no HTML on Monday, no CSS on Monday, no concepts building on each other. We're not putting HTML in the past. HTML is going to come back to us, but not next week. Next week, we get an entirely new topic, entirely new concepts, entirely new syntax, and we're going from there. So we'll see you guys on Monday. Don't forget to fill out the feedback form if you've got any feedback to send. If you don't have anything to send, that's okay. I am not quite sure about the group meeting. If you're not sure, message Laura in Slack and she can get back to you. But if someone else said yes, then there probably is one at 5:30 tomorrow. So I've got for you guys. Have a great night. I'm going to stop the recording.